true.
Have been reported. They say the situation is still ongoing. A lockdown has been put in place there, with officials telling people to stay inside, close and lock all windows and doors. You can see that advisory, that alert on screen there. Our Jesse Kirsch is tracking all of this. And
yeah, Hallie, we know that the FBI is now involved along with the military. We know from the governor of Georgia that law enforcement is involved as well and that the governor is in touch with authorities. And this situation has schools locked down more than 25 miles away. I want to share this tweet that we have a short time ago from Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia. And I want to flag a couple things he mentions there. He says they're in close contact with law enforcement. He also says that his family is saddened by today's tragedy. He also says we are keeping the victims, their families, and all those who answer the call to serve in our hearts and prayers. And of course, Hallie, we unfortunately cover active shooter situations far too frequently, and I think it's striking to see the governor referring to this situation with the terms tragedy and victims at this early hour. Here's what we know about Fort Stewart. It is about 41 miles outside of Savannah, Georgia, in the eastern part of the state, and it is a central facility for both training as well as deployment. And in fact, I want to read a part of what we know from the installation's website. It says the largest military aircraft can land at Hunter, referring to the air portion of this facility, load the biggest equipment in the Army inventory, and then deploy both equipment and soldiers within an 18-hour wheels-up timeline to contingency operations anywhere in the world. And as you mentioned, Hallie, officials at this point are saying that there are multiple casualties and that the situation is ongoing. That last update from authorities on the Facebook page for this military installation came about 45 minutes ago, and I keep refreshing to see if there is any update, and just did it again right now, and that is still the latest, Hallie. So from about 45 minutes ago, authorities telling us there was an active shooter incident, a lockdown status at Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield in Georgia, and that the situation remains ongoing with multiple casualties reported, Hallie. And of course, we're waiting for more information from authorities and keeping an eye on live pictures as they start coming in from the scene.
Jesse Kirsch, thank you. Let's bring in now our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby, who's joining us now from her perch at the Pentagon. Court, we know that the FBI is coordinating now with the Army on this investigation. This all has unfolded in just the last few minutes. So I want to just note for viewers, this is coming in as we speak here. What else are you hearing from folks that you're talking to there at the Pentagon?
Yeah, we're just starting to get a little bit more detail. As Jesse was mentioned, there have been multiple casualties. And remember, when the military talks about casualties, they're often referring not just to people who may have been killed, but also injured. And that does appear to be the case for now, that there have been multiple people, at least 5, we are told, who have been injured as a part of this. There are no reports of any of those who have been killed at this point. But again, Hallie, I cannot stress enough about how this information, I'm sorry I keep looking down because the information is literally coming in as we are standing here now. Just a scene set here. The lockdown began just after 11 a.m. Eastern time. Fort Stewart, as we heard from Jesse, it's just on the southeastern part of Georgia. There's about 10,000, give or take, men and women at that base. That's both uniform and civilian. It's home to the storied 3rd Infantry Division. The lockdown began after reports of an active shooter. At this point, it does appear to still be on lockdown, although we are chasing the possibility that maybe they have someone in custody. We're still chasing that. That is, the Facebook page is being updated, I believe, as we speak with that information. So anyway, again, what we know right now, multiple people have been shot, at least 5. No indication yet on the status of those individuals beyond. At this point, there are no reports of any of those people that have been killed yet, Hallie.
And do we know anything, Courtney? And again, I want to stress this is very preliminary. It is coming in live, almost minute by minute here. Do we have any indication of the suspected shooter here, of whoever the attacker was, where this person or people may be right now?
At this point, officials are not aware of a second shooter, but I think the fact that the base is still on lockdown would likely indicate that they are just absolutely checking every possible corner to ensure that there is no second shooter, and then also to be sure that they actually have they have identified the correct person who may be responsible for this. We're also still asking about the possibility of the status of the shooter, what exactly happened here. But again, as I said, this is all starting. This is really just starting to unfold right now. I'm sorry, I keep looking down because I'm getting messages about it as we stand here. What's important to remember, though, at this point, this does appear that they are still on lockdown, but officials are searching to ensure that there is no additional threat to the base at this point.
Courtney, can you talk, as we're taking a live look here, this is outside of Fort Stewart there in Georgia, what security typically is for a military installation like this?
Yes, so it would have they would have a basic perimeter security. There would be gates where they have military police who would not allow the public to come on board. That's been pretty much the case since 9/11, and certain bases have a higher or a lower level of security. So, for instance, you can bring, if you were someone who's able to be on the base, you have a badge to get on base.
Yeah,
some bases will allow you to bring a visitor on or not, but there is a base level of security here. But again, what's critical here is the officials we're talking to are saying that this all occurred on the base already. It does not appear at this point. We're not hearing any indication.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want, again, as this is all coming in, we have just gotten an update now from the Fort Stewart Facebook page here, where we're getting these official updates coming in. And Courtney, this tracks with what you have reported from the sources you're talking to. So I want to take a beat. I want to read this out. Again, this is what we're just getting in now from Fort Stewart, that 5 soldiers were shot today in an active shooter incident at Fort Stewart. They say all the soldiers were treated on site. They've been moved to an Army community hospital nearby for further treatment. They say, importantly, there is no active threat to the community. In other words, this incident is over. Here's some of the details. That the dispatch from law enforcement came just 4 minutes before 11 a.m. Eastern, 10:56 a.m. They say the shooter was apprehended at 11:35 a.m. The lockdown happened about 9 minutes, or 8 minutes rather, after the police dispatch, the law enforcement dispatch came in here. Obviously, emergency medical personnel were dispatched. They're continuing to investigate. They are advising that they will, can not be releasing more information until they get more. But there's a couple of key pieces of news that we're getting from this court. Number one, that there is no more active threat. This shooter, the suspected attacker, has been taken into custody. That happened as of just the last 60 minutes. 5 soldiers were shot and are being treated at the hospital as we speak. So, Courtney, with that, the obviously level of medical care at the Wynn Army Community Hospital is going to be obviously critical here. We do not know the condition of these soldiers either, Courtney.
And there is a hospital on base there, so they would have, fortunately, a quick transit to get there. There is still one facility on the base that's apparently on lockdown. That's the 2nd ABCT. That's the Armored Brigade Combat Team facility that would be on lockdown. That it does appear that this is where this originated, this active shooter event. But yes, this is what I've been waiting for this update to come through. As we were hearing that 5 soldiers were shot. It still appear at this point that there were injuries, but no one was killed in this. But again, we don't have a good sense yet of the nature of their injuries, whether any of them could be extreme or not. So we're keeping that in mind as the situation continues to evolve. We did learn a little bit more, as you mentioned, that the lockdown for the overall base, meaning the gates and things that we were talking about, Hallie, that was lifted about 30 minutes ago. But as I mentioned, there's the one facility, and this seems to be where this entire event originated, that remains on lockdown for now. And again, I imagine that this is so that the military police, that the base officials, that they can search every single corner, and then also so that they can keep it locked down in case there's any evidence or anything that they need to gather as part of what will surely be an extensive investigation here.
Courtney, let me give you a beat just to check your phone. I know you're getting a lot of messages, and while you do, I want to bring in NBC News law enforcement analyst Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, when you look at the timeline here, roughly 40 minutes between law enforcement being dispatched here with reports of a shooting to when the shooter was apprehended, about 39 minutes. Help us understand what's going on from the perspective of law enforcement during that time.
Right, Haley. Well, very efficient response by the military police, the base police at Fort Stewart. I've been on Fort Stewart. I've worked with the Army there, explosive ordnance disposal guys. We work with them a lot in ATF the federal law enforcement agents have a giant training facility just an hour south of there, so we had a lot of interaction with them. It's like a city, but they're efficient as well. I mean, good news that they captured or apprehended the shooter, and the announcement from the military is the shooting is stopped and everyone is safe. Now they're going to have, Hallie, a major investigation on their hands, and of course, major work by the hospital to, help the wounded civilians and soldiers who've been injured. So that's the big task unfolding now. Now they'll be sweeping those buildings like Courtney described for the combat brigade. They'll be making sure there's nobody else there, and they'll be looking for conspirators. You'll have the military police, the base police, Army, CID, the Criminal Investigation Division Command. Those guys are great. We work with them all the time. Very, very good investigators. You'll have FBI and you'll have ATF. And you'll also have the Georgia state authorities. You'll have the GBI come in. The county will come in. They'll get all the help they need. They'll make an all-hands team, joint investigation. They'll be interviewing this suspect. If they have someone and they can stop it and it's only this person, that's a good ending to a bad situation, that there's nobody else under a threat. But there'll be a prosecution over this, Hallie, so it's going to be a major crime scene operation, and there's going to have to do everything by the numbers if they want to get the right conviction. So it's going to be a full day for the military on Fort Stewart, and a rough day for some of the families for sure.
Of course. Jim, I'm going to ask you to stand by. I want to go back to Courtney and QB now, because Courtney, as we understand now that the suspected shooter has been apprehended, is there any indication of whether this individual was a member of the military or a civilian? In other words, what is civilian access to a base like this?
Yeah, we've been asking that same question to see. We don't have any indication yet whether the alleged shooter here was a member of the Army, a member of the military or not. And keep in mind, the person could have base access and not actually be a soldier. That could be the person could be a civilian who works on base, or a family member, or a veteran who may have access. So at this point, that's not clear. I've been asking whether the shooter was in a uniform or not at the time, and that's another question that we just don't have an answer to yet. And I suspect that's what, as the situation unfolds, we'll hear more about it. It does appear that all of the injured soldiers, they were taken to the base hospital, which is Wynn Army Community Hospital, for treatment, but we still don't have an indication of the severity or the extent of their injuries. But officials are still telling us that at this point, they are counting it as 5 injured. The other question that we're still trying to get an answer to here, Hallie, is whether the shooter was actually injured in any way during the apprehension or during this what seems to be a gunfight here of some sort. We don't have an answer to that yet either. Those are still the things that we're looking for. And at this point, again, while the base is not on lockdown, that one facility, the Armored Brigade Combat Team for the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team Complex, that does remain on lockdown. Officials telling us that could be the case for some time going forward, and it's exactly what you guys were just talking about. In part, is for the ongoing investigation. They want to ensure that they don't do anything that could cause trouble at this crime scene.
You lay out the series of questions that investigators are looking for. Among those two, Courtney, will undoubtedly be whatever the motive may have been in this shooting attack.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's going to be one of the biggest questions here, especially if this is a case of a U.S. soldier who opened fire on other soldiers. Hallie, unfortunately, this is not the first time we've seen a scenario like this, where we've had someone in uniform open fire on a military installation. But the big question here is, if that is the case, why did this person do it? These are all the kinds of things that we'll be asking about going forward.
Courtney, stay close to a camera. I want to go back to Jesse Kirsch for a moment, because when you look at an instance like this, at a situation like this, there are reverberations well beyond just Fort Stewart, the military facility itself, into the surrounding community too, Jesse.
Absolutely, Hallie. And just to put in perspective, this was the first week back to school for Appling County, Georgia. That's about 25 miles west of Fort Stewart. And even at that distance, this school district went on lockdown. And they shared a post about this on social media a short time ago. And I just think it underscores, right, the way these kinds of situations can reverberate and cause concern well beyond the immediate vicinity. We're talking about quite a ways away, 25 plus miles. That's really just the boundary of that county is 25 miles away, and yet that school system, K through 12, with about 3,400 students according to the district website, went on a lockdown as all this unfolded. We don't know exactly when they went on lockdown. They posted within the last hour about this. And of course, we now know from the latest information from the military that this report of a possible shooting came in around 10:56 a.m. So, we don't know exactly when the lockdown occurred. But again, we're talking about a school district, kids back for their first week, for kindergartners, their first time in school, and they're dealing with a lockdown because of an active shooter situation just 3 days into the school year, Hallie.
Jesse, thank you. Let me go back to Jim Kavanaugh here. Jim, there have been reports of somebody perhaps live streaming from where this incident was happening. If that's the case, one would imagine that's a key piece of evidence for investigators as they move forward, no?
No, it's critical, Hallie, and they're going to have to get that and search through it. And, of course, the other impending thing is, what vehicle or how did the person arrive at the crime scene? And that vehicle will have to be swept for an explosive device or any other weapons. And the residence of the actor, the perpetrator. Law enforcement's going to have to go to that residence, wherever that is. It's just like we saw the New York shooter in the skyscraper last week. He was from Las Vegas. But wherever that residence is, authorities are going to have to go there. And they're going to have to, gather together and go in there with the bomb squads and FBI and ATF and get in there and make sure there's no explosives set, make sure no one else was murdered prior to this event. Sometimes what happens is, the person kills their family members, their significant other, someone, steals a car, takes a gun, and, all of a sudden we're in some active shooter. So that all has to be checked, and that's all going to be happening today, wherever this person's residence is, the vehicle and the residence. Now, those are very impending safety considerations for everyone. That'll be happening. That's what the on-scene commanders, the provost marshal, military, CID commanders, and the agents will all be doing. And like you said with Courtney, the crime scene. So you have 5 people injured by gunfire, or maybe more. You're going to have spent casings all over there. You're going to have blood. You're going to have bloody footprints. You're going to have, all kinds of a horrible crime scene. It's got to be preserved, photographed. Every bullet, the trajectory of every bullet is marked and cataloged, and there's fingerprint processing. There's all of what goes on. We all know and live through that, watching that on TV, forensic files and Dateline and so forth. So you know how it works. But it's a lot of work, and it's going to be happening all through the day and all through the night and probably tomorrow, just on the crime scene. Impending today, though, is those safety things we just discussed, and, of course, interviewing the subject. Who is he and why did he do this?
And the victims
as well,
if that's a possibility. Yeah, Jim Kavanaugh. Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to share with folks that in just the last 90 seconds or so, we have learned that the president has been briefed on this shooting at Fort Stewart and that the White House is monitoring the situation. I want to bring back Courtney Kube, who's live for us at the Pentagon. That is not at all unexpected here, Courtney. That would be something you would think you would see after an incident like this with such a large federal response.
Yeah, and Hallie, I think that just really underscores here how important this incident is and how seriously it's being taken. The fact that Caroline Leavitt tweeting that the president has been briefed on it, the White House is monitoring it, that just shows the seriousness with which this situation is. And I mean, again, at this point, multiple soldiers were shot. The authorities saying that there were 5 shot. At this point, again, still hearing that they were injured, no reports of anyone who was killed in this incident. And I just have to add one more thing to the conversation from Jim Kavanaugh. One other thing that will be a big part of this investigation is how was someone able to get a gun on this base? What was the situation in which an individual had a weapon on the base? It's not something that would be commonly seen unless it's specifically for your job, like a military police officer or something. That's definitely another piece of this that we will be asking questions about, and I suspect the investigators will in the days and weeks ahead, Hallie.
What kind of checks might you typically see for that when you enter a military base, Court?
So remember, if you are someone who is allowed to be on that base, so a member of the military or even a civilian who comes on and off the base with an access card, you wouldn't necessarily be checked for that weapon, but you are not supposed to have it in most cases while you're on base. So it's a big question, and these are the sorts of things that we've heard in the past where there have been incidents like this, shootings on military installations. One of the biggest questions is always, why did that person have a gun on base? Why did they have a weapon? And how did that fall through the cracks that the person was able to get on there with that? And again, in this case, shoot 5 fellow soldiers.
Courtney Kuby, our thanks to you live at the Pentagon. Our thanks to Jesse Kirsch and to Jim Kavanaugh as well. That concludes this NBC News special report. Again, 5 soldiers shot in an active shooter incident at Fort Stewart in Georgia. We will have much more ahead on NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Hallie Jackson. Thanks for watching.